During my years as a designer, I have borrowed, skimmed, stolen and read more design books than I can remember. But there's one which stands out to me more than any others, and it's this. This book is called The Best Interface is No Interface. It was written by Golden Krishna and published in 2015. I love this book, and I'd argue that it's one of the best books about user experience and design published in the last 20 years. In this video, I'm going to tell you what this book is all about and why it's so readable. I'm going to tell you why it's relevant to right now, and if you stick around to the end, I'll give you the 4 biggest takeaways I had when reading this book. But before we get into all of that, let me just say hi, I'm Pavan. I make videos here on YouTube about how to become a better designer. So if that interests you, please do hit subscribe. So this book is split into 2 halves. The first part is all about what the problem is with interfaces, and the second part is all about different principles around this thesis that Golden Krishna proposes called NoUI. The book opens with a foreword which has this lovely quote from Johnny Ive which says, "It's part of the human condition that if we struggle to do something, we assume the problem resides with us." We're not primed to think that interfaces are a big problem because we're so used to seeing them absolutely everywhere. We're so used to interacting with them, but this is not the best way of doing things. And this is made most pertinent with an example where Golden Krishna takes us through this step-by-step process of what it's like to unlock a car using the BMW app. He breaks this down with how many of the steps of unlocking your car are done using an app on your phone, and why this was a terrible innovation, supposedly, by the BMW team. He also talks about how most interfaces are purposefully designed to make us more addicted, and the problems that can have with being more distracted and finding it harder to sleep. None of this is super revolutionary, but where I love this book is the 3 principles that he puts forward. So those principles are: embrace typical processes instead of using screens, make computers serve us instead of us serving them, and adapt to individual needs and proactively solve problems. So an example of that first principle comes from the Lockitron app. The first version of this app was an interface on your phone where you had to press a button on your phone screen to unlock your front door. The second version was a kind of keyless entry system which made use of a sensor on the phone that knows that you're coming home and it just unlocks automatically. Another example comes from a very old app called Square and the Square tab function, which told local cafes that you were on your way to see them, and therefore maybe a barista could prepare your favorite drink for you before you even got there. I love what he calls these. He calls these back pocket apps. Apps that live on your phone, do everything they need to do, but they just work without you having to take them out of your pocket or interact with a screen. An example of the second principle about making computers serve us is from 1991, where he describes that active badge. And it was a tiny little badge, kind of like this microphone I'm wearing, that would just sit on the wearer and transmit their identity. It meant that doors could unlock if that person had access to them. This was before people had mobile phones, so it was used to prototype getting phone calls rerouted to your nearest physical landline. So like really ancient stuff, but really interesting ideas and examples. The third principle was adapting to an individual's needs. And an example he gives is of the Nest thermostat, which has actually become, really ubiquitous now. Lots of people have these and use them. They slowly learn over time what temperature you like your house. Another really cool example he gives is of the EarlySense Everon sensor, which lives under a mattress for a patient in a hospital, and it automatically sends out signals to do with their heart rate, their movement, their respiration, and means that doctors don't have to disturb a patient while they're sleeping, and also the patient can have better care. The technology is taking a proactive step to improve the patient's experience instead of it just being an add-on or an afterthought. So that's kind of an overview, but I really do think you should get a copy of this because it's just so readable. We had that example earlier of him walking through the BMW app flow of all of the inane, mundane steps you have to take to use that app. He also has a lot of like cool informational design to get points across, and then also some more whimsical things. For example, on the chapter about back pocket apps, to make his point about how distracting it is to keep pulling it out, he has a few full pages of taking it out, tap on the interface, put it back in your pocket. In the chapter on distraction, he keeps breaking up the text, and it really helps to get his point across. So I said at the beginning, I think this book is more relevant than ever now, even though it's been 10 years since it was first published. And some of the examples he gives, like Square and Facebook, are really dated, and some are so ubiquitous now, like Nest thermostat or smart locks for your front door. But forgetting all the examples for a second, I think the principles and the theory in this is what's so relevant. He talks about computers working for you rather than you working for the computers. He talks about back pocket apps. And this example is a concept that we've seen this year in the little wearables that pair AI models with sensors. And this is the interesting thing. He only uses the phrase machine learning twice in this book. But I think all of the AI machine learning-y stuff we've seen this year is just going to make this idea of NoUI technology way, way more doable. I would even put it like the technology is only just catching up with the ideas which he proposes here. Near the end, he has a really good example of how doors automatically open. Now, obviously that's not revolutionary to us, but this is an idea which comes from over 2,000 years ago from Heron of Alexandria, and it got made in 1960 by Lee Hewitt and D. Horton. As he writes, the seamless automatic solutions sometimes take decades before they're reliable enough to become part of our everyday life. So I hope I've convinced you to give this book a go. Just before we finish, here are my 4 biggest takeaways from reading The Best Interface is No Interface. The first is a line which is quoted in the book by Paul Sappho, who writes that you can never go wrong by betting that change will go slower than everyone expects. And it's us as UX designers working right now in 2025 who are going to be at the forefront of that change, who are going to be able to dictate what the future of experience design looks like. The next one is a line from Ellis Hamburger, who wrote the foreword, who says the key is forgetting what we've learned about interfaces and using our instincts as guides. I think that really sums up a lot of what Golden Krishna is trying to get to. It's about forgetting our default assumption to use a lazy rectangle and draw an app interface and just think about how we'd instinctively try and solve problems before we had mobile phones and computers at our hands. The third takeaway I have is that the best interface is no interface doesn't mean that the only outcome is to not have an interface. It's just that it's the best possible solution. On our way to coming up with that, it's okay to still keep using apps and interfaces as a fallback. This is still quite theoretical stuff, but I think what it means is our North Star, or what we're aiming for, should be to solve problems without having to use an interface. And the last takeaway I have is much more practical. It's about how we start on the process of designing in a no UI world. And that is to consider every part of user input that we have and see whether we can replace it with some form of machine input. Can we make use of sensors on the devices? Can we make use of large language models to try and get the computers to do all the talking to each other and not require us to be interacting with an interface? So that's it from me. Thanks so much for watching this one. Like I said, please do hit subscribe. Most of my viewers aren't subscribed and that makes me sad. So if you can take 2 seconds to hit the subscribe button, it'd really help me out as I try and grow this channel. Get a copy of this book. I absolutely love it. The end.